Why no one in the galaxy dares to confront humans, the great chamber of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, and its curved walls glowed with the soft light of 1,000 stars projected from the ceiling above. Representatives from over 300 species filled the floating platforms that circled the central speaking area, and their voices created a constant hum of conversation in dozens of languages that the translation systems worked hard to convert into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Kethra of the Vellani Dominion rose from her platform and glided toward the central podium, her 4 translucent wings catching the artificial starlight and scattering it into rainbow patterns across the chamber walls. She was tall and elegant, with silver skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, and her 3 eyes burned with a cold intelligence that had intimidated diplomats across the galaxy for over 2 centuries. "Fellow members of the Council," she began, her voice carrying easily through the vast space thanks to the acoustic technology built into every surface. "We are here today to discuss a matter of great importance to the future of our peaceful union." The chamber fell silent as species of every shape and size turned their attention to the Vellani ambassador, knowing that she rarely spoke unless she had something significant to say. "A new species has petitioned for membership in our great council," Kethra continued, and her tone made it clear that she did not consider this good news. "They call themselves humans, and they come from a small blue planet in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy that most of our star charts do not even bother to name." Murmurs rippled through the assembled delegates as images appeared in the air above the central podium, showing the creatures in question. They were strange-looking beings with only 2 eyes and 2 arms and 2 legs, covered in soft skin that came in various shades of brown and pink and tan. They had no claws and no fangs and no natural armor, and they looked so fragile that many of the delegates wondered how they had survived long enough to develop space travel at all. "As you can see," Kethra said, with obvious disdain dripping from every word, "they are primitive beings, barely capable of interstellar travel, with technology that our youngest civilization surpassed thousands of years ago." A crystalline elder named Arkan Yulvak sat in the highest platform of the chamber, his ancient body made of living mineral that had been growing and evolving for over 10,000 years. He watched the proceedings with eyes that looked like windows into deep space, saying nothing as the Vellani ambassador continued her presentation. "But their primitive nature is not the most concerning aspect of this species," Kethra declared, and she waved her hand to change the images floating above the podium. "What truly makes them unsuitable for membership is their violent and unstable nature." The new images showed scenes of human conflict that made many delegates gasp in horror. Cities burned and armies clashed, and weapons of terrible power turned entire regions into wastelands of ash and poison. The humans were not fighting alien enemies or defending against cosmic threats, but were instead turning their weapons against each other with a fury that seemed almost impossible to believe. "They wage war upon themselves," Kethra announced, her voice rising with righteous anger. "They have nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times with their constant fighting, and they seem incapable of existing in peace even among their own kind." The chamber erupted in shocked conversation as delegates discussed this disturbing information with their neighbors. How could any species survive such constant internal conflict? How could they ever be trusted to participate in the peaceful cooperation that the Galactic Council represented? "I move that we deny the human petition for membership," Kethra concluded, "and that we establish a quarantine zone around their region of space to protect our civilizations from their violent tendencies." The motion seemed certain to pass, as nearly every delegate was nodding in agreement with the Vellani ambassador's assessment. The humans were clearly too dangerous and too primitive to be welcomed into galactic society, and keeping them isolated seemed like the wise and sensible choice. But then something unexpected happened that no one in the chamber had anticipated. Archon Yulvex, the eldest of the crystalline elders and the oldest living being in the known galaxy, slowly rose from his platform. His movements were deliberate and careful, as befitting a creature whose body was made of living crystal that had been forming for millennia. And the sound of stone grinding against stone echoed through the suddenly silent chamber. No one could remember the last time the Archon had spoken at a council meeting. Some said it had been 1,000 years, while others claimed it had been even longer. He simply observed and listened and kept his ancient wisdom to himself, trusting the younger species to manage their own affairs. "I must speak," the Archon said, and his voice was like the rumbling of distant mountains, deep and powerful and impossible to ignore. Every eye in the chamber turned to face the ancient being, and even Cathra fell silent as she waited to hear what wisdom he might share. "I have watched 10,000 species rise and fall across the ages," the Archon continued, his crystalline body catching the light and sending sparkles dancing across the walls. "I have seen empires that spanned entire galaxies crumble into dust, and I have watched gods be born and forgotten in the endless march of time." He paused, and the silence in the chamber was so complete that delegates could hear their own hearts beating. "I have studied every species that has ever achieved sentience in this galaxy, and I have learned the patterns of their rise and their fall. And I tell you now with absolute certainty that you must not provoke the humans." Gasps of shock rippled through the assembled delegates. What could possibly make the Archon speak this way about such a primitive and weak species? "Grant them membership in this council," the Archon commanded, his voice growing stronger with every word. "Grant them whatever they wish, and treat them with respect and kindness at all times." Cathra found her voice and dared to question the ancient being, asking what could possibly justify such unusual advice. The Archon turned his ancient eyes toward the Vellani ambassador, and for the first time in recorded history, the delegates saw something that chilled them to their very cores. They saw fear in the eyes of a being who had witnessed the birth and death of stars. "Pray that they never learn what they truly are," the Archon whispered, "because on that day, the galaxy will learn what fear really means." And with those words, he returned to his silence, leaving the council to wonder what terrible secret he knew about the strange soft creatures from that unremarkable blue planet. 3 cycles had passed as the Galactic Council made the surprising decision to grant humanity membership, and most species had already forgotten about the strange warning from Archon Yulvex. The humans were so small and so weak and so far away that no one really paid attention to them as they began to spread slowly through their little corner of the galaxy. But the Vraxians paid attention. The Vraxians were a species of massive reptilian warriors who had built their empire on the backs of slaves taken from 100 conquered worlds. They stood nearly 8 feet tall with scales like armor and claws like knives, and their red eyes glowed with a hunger that never seemed satisfied. For generations, they had terrorized the outer reaches of the galaxy, attacking colonies and capturing the weak to serve in their mines and factories and fighting pits. And now they had discovered a new target. Kepler Station was a small human mining outpost on a rocky moon at the edge of human space, and it was home to just over 400 people who spent their days extracting rare minerals from the ancient stone. There were miners and engineers and scientists, but there were also families with children and elderly grandparents and young couples just starting their lives together. Commander Vrex of the Vraxian raiding fleet looked at the station on his view screen and smiled with all 3 rows of his sharp teeth. This would be easy, he thought, as easy as every other raid he had conducted over his long and violent career. These soft pink creatures would surrender the moment they saw his warships, and he would have 400 new slaves to sell at the markets. "Attention human colony," Vrex broadcast on all frequencies. "You are now property of the Vraxian Empire, and you will surrender immediately or face complete destruction. He waited for the panicked response that always came from his victims, the desperate pleas for mercy and the tearful offers of cooperation. He had heard it 1,000 times before, and he was already bored with these humans before the conquest had even begun. But the response that came back was not what he expected. "This is Station Commander Marcus Webb," a calm human voice replied, "and I want you to know that we received your message and we have discussed it among ourselves." Rex leaned forward with interest, wondering if perhaps these humans were foolish enough to try to negotiate. "We have decided," the human continued, his voice still impossibly calm, "that we are not going to surrender, and that you should probably turn your ships around and leave while you still can." The Vraxian commander burst into laughter that echoed through his bridge, and his crew joined him in mocking the ridiculous humans who dared to threaten a Vraxian war fleet. Did they not understand that they were facing the most feared warriors in the galaxy? Did they not know that their little station had no defenses that could possibly stop even one of his ships? "You have made a grave error," Rex growled as his amusement faded into anger, "and now you will pay for your foolishness." He ordered his troops to board the station and capture everyone inside, expecting the operation to take no more than an hour. His soldiers were the best in the Empire, armed with plasma rifles and protected by armor that could stop almost any weapon. These soft humans would fall before them like grass before a wildfire. But something went wrong from the very first moment. The Vraxian soldiers breached the station's outer hull and poured into the corridors, ready to overwhelm any resistance with their superior numbers and firepower. Instead, they found themselves in a nightmare that none of them had been trained to face. The humans did not run, and they did not hide, and they did not surrender. They fought back with everything they had, using mining equipment as weapons and turning every corridor into a death trap. Plasma cutters designed to slice through rock burned through Vraxian armor just as easily, and improvised explosives made from mining charges brought entire sections of the station crashing down on the invaders. Elena Vasquez was a geologist who had spent her career studying rocks and minerals, and she had never held a weapon in her entire life. But when the Vraxians came through the door of the shelter where 20 children were hiding, she picked up a mining pickaxe and stood in their way. "You want them," she said quietly, her hands trembling, but her eyes burning with something the Vraxians had never seen before. "Then you have to go through me first." The first Vraxian warrior laughed and charged at her, certain that this small, soft creature would fall with a single blow. But Elena did not fall, and she did not retreat, and she did not stop fighting even when her arms screamed with exhaustion and her body was covered in wounds that should have killed her 10 times over. For 6 hours, she held that corridor against wave after wave of armored warriors. And every time one of them fell, another took his place. But she would not move, and she would not stop, and she would not let them reach those children. When the human military vessel Defiance finally arrived, the Vraxians tried to retreat to their ships and escape into the void. But the humans would not let them go. The Defiance pursued the Vraxian fleet across 3 star systems, hunting them down one ship at a time with a patience and determination that terrified the reptilian warriors. The humans broadcast no demands and accepted no surrender and showed no mercy. And one by one, the Vraxian ships were destroyed until only Commander Vrex remained. His final transmission was broadcast across the entire galaxy, and every species heard the terror in his voice as he screamed his last words. "They do not stop," he cried as human weapons tore his ship apart around him. "They do not negotiate, and they remember everything we have done. Run while you can, because they are coming for all of us." The Vraxian Empire collapsed within a single cycle, but not because the humans invaded their worlds or conquered their systems. It collapsed because every other species that had ever worked with the Vraxians fled in terror, desperate to distance themselves from the slavers before the humans noticed the connection. And across the galaxy, Beings who had dismissed the humans as weak and primitive began to wonder if perhaps they had made a terrible mistake. Elena Vasquez survived her wounds and became a hero to her people. And when reporters asked her how she had found the strength to fight for so long against impossible odds, she simply smiled and said that she had not been fighting for herself. "I was fighting for the children behind me," she explained. "And I would have kept fighting until my heart stopped beating and my body turned to dust. Because that is what humans do when someone threatens the people we love." The galaxy was beginning to understand, but the true lesson was still to come. The destruction of the Vraxian Empire sent shockwaves through the galaxy that could not be ignored, and the leaders of the most powerful civilizations demanded answers. How had a species so young and so primitive managed to defeat warriors who had terrorized the outer reaches for generations? What secret weapon did the humans possess that allowed them to fight with such terrifying determination? Archon Yulvex called a secret meeting in a hidden chamber deep beneath the Council's great hall, and only the 12 most powerful leaders in the galaxy were invited to attend. They came from empires that spanned thousands of worlds, and together they controlled more military might than the rest of the galaxy combined. "You have questions," the ancient Archon said as the leaders took their seats around the circular table, "and I will finally give you answers, though I warn you that you will not like what you hear." High Sovereign Malachar of the Dominion of the 100 Thrones leaned forward with impatience burning in his 6 golden eyes, demanding to know what made the humans so dangerous. His empire was the largest in the galaxy, and he did not believe that any species could truly threaten his power. "Tell us their weakness," Malachar commanded, "so that we may exploit it if they ever become a threat to our civilizations." The Archon made a sound that might have been laughter, though it was hard to tell with a being made of living crystal, and he shook his ancient head slowly. "You still do not understand," he said softly, "and so I will explain what I have learned from watching these creatures since they first crawled out of their planet's oceans." He waved his hand and holographic images appeared in the air above the table, showing the planet Earth as it had looked millions of years in the past. Most species in this galaxy evolved in environments that were stable and predictable. The Archon began. They faced challenges, yes, but their worlds allowed them to develop at a comfortable pace, with plenty of resources and few existential threats. The images shifted to show alien worlds covered in gentle forests and peaceful oceans, where the ancestors of current galactic species had lived in relative safety. But Earth was different, the Archon continued, and the images changed to show a world of violent extremes. The humans evolved on what we would call a death world, a planet that seemed determined to kill everything that lived on it. The leaders watched in horror as the images showed massive volcanic eruptions and planet-spanning ice ages and asteroid impacts that filled the sky with fire. They saw predators with teeth like swords and prey that fought back with horns and tusks in desperate fury. They saw climates that shifted from burning deserts to frozen wastelands in the span of a few thousand years. Any other species would have died, the Archon said grimly, but the humans refused. He showed them images of early humans hunting creatures many times their size, working together in groups and using tools and tricks to bring down animals that should have been impossible to kill. They developed something unique, the Archon explained, something that no other species in the galaxy has ever truly possessed, and it is the key to understanding why they are so dangerous. He paused to make sure everyone was listening carefully. They develop persistence, he said, the ability to keep going long after any reasonable creature would have given up and died. The images showed humans chasing prey across vast grasslands, running after animals for hours and then days without stopping. The animals were faster, but the humans never tired, and eventually, every creature they hunted would collapse from exhaustion while the humans kept coming. They cannot run as fast as their prey, the Archon noted, but they do not need to. because they simply refused to stop. He showed them human medical records that made several of the alien leaders feel sick with disbelief. Humans could survive injuries that would kill almost any other species, and they could keep fighting even with broken bones and torn muscles and wounds that would leave other creatures helpless. Their bodies are designed to endure punishment that would destroy us, the Archon said, and their minds are even more resilient than their flesh. The images changed to show human psychological profiles, and the alien leaders struggled to understand what they were seeing. They have a concept called spite, the Archon explained, which is the desire to keep fighting simply because someone told them they could not win. And they bond with each other so strongly that they will die for strangers they have never met. High Sovereign Malachar scoffed at this, declaring that all species felt loyalty to their own kind. "Not like this," the Archon replied, and his voice carried a weight that silenced the Sovereign's objections. "Humans will sacrifice themselves for creatures of other species, for animals, even for machines they have grown attached to." He showed them stories of humans risking their lives to save pets and livestock and wild animals that could have killed them. He showed them tales of soldiers who threw themselves on explosives to save their friends, and parents who lifted impossible weights to rescue their children. They do not fight like predators who calculate risk and reward. The Archon continued. They fight like creatures who have already accepted death and have decided to take their enemies with them. The alien leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they began to understand. And worst of all, the Archon said with something like awe in his ancient voice, they love it. He showed them human entertainment, stories of war and struggle and survival against impossible odds. He showed them how humans celebrated their veterans and told tales of battles that had happened thousands of years ago. He showed them the human concept of glory, the idea that dying in battle was something to be desired rather than feared. You cannot intimidate a species that runs toward danger for amusement, the Archon concluded. You cannot outlast a species that treats exhaustion as a personal challenge. And you cannot defeat a species that sees extinction-level threats as motivation to try harder. The chamber fell silent as the leaders absorbed this terrible truth. "So what do we do?" one of them finally asked, his voice small and frightened. The Archon's crystal eyes seemed to glow with inner fire as he gave them the only advice that could save them. "Be kind to them," he said simply. "Be honest and fair, and never give them a reason to see you as an enemy. Because once a human decides that you are a threat to something they love, they will never stop coming for you." The leaders left that chamber with fear in their hearts and a new understanding in their minds. But not all of them were wise enough to listen. Centuries passed like waves against the shores of time, and the galaxy changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The humans spread across the stars with their strange mixture of curiosity and determination, building colonies and stations and outposts wherever they found a place that caught their interest. They made alliances with species that had once feared them, and they shared their strange culture with anyone willing to learn. Other beings discovered the joy of human music, those patterns of sound and rhythm that could make hearts soar with happiness or sink with sorrow. They learned about human art, those images and sculptures and performances that somehow captured emotions and ideas in ways that transcended language. And they experienced human humor, that bizarre tendency to find amusement in the strangest things and to laugh in situations that should have brought only despair. The Villani, who had once argued so strongly against human membership in the Council, became some of humanity's closest friends. They discovered that humans made wonderful companions for their long philosophical discussions, always ready to debate and question and explore new ideas with endless enthusiasm. The Crystalline Elders found in humans a kindred appreciation for patience and long-term thinking, though the humans approached these concepts from a very different perspective. Where the Elders saw the slow march of geological time, Humans saw the steady progress of generations building upon the work of their ancestors. Even the remnants of the Vraxian people, scattered and humbled after the fall of their empire, found unexpected mercy from the humans they had wronged. Human relief organizations arrived on Vraxian refugee worlds with food and medicine and shelter. And when the shocked Vraxians asked why their former enemies would help them, the humans simply shrugged and said it was the right thing to do. But no matter how many friendships were formed and how much trust was built, no one in the galaxy ever forgot what humans were capable of when pushed too far. In the deepest archives of the Galactic Council, hidden beneath layers of security that only the most senior officials could access, a document was kept that had been passed down through generations of archons. It was updated by each new keeper, adding observations and warnings from their own experiences with humanity, and it was titled simply, Regarding Humanity. The current Archon, a young being by crystalline standards who had only lived for 3,000 years, made his way to the archive to add his own entry to the ancient record. He had spent centuries studying humans and living among them and trying to understand the paradox they represented. He opened the document and read through the entries of his predecessors, nodding at some observations and smiling at others. Then he found a blank space at the end and began to write his own contribution. I have lived among the humans for longer than any of my predecessors, he began, his crystal fingers forming words in the ancient language of his people. And I have come to understand them in ways that I could never have imagined before I began this journey. He paused to gather his thoughts before continuing. They will share their food with strangers who have done nothing to earn their kindness, and they will die for people they have never met simply because those people needed help. His crystal eyes grew distant as he remembered the things he had witnessed. They will weep over the death of animals and laugh in the face of certain doom. And they will find beauty in the strangest places while remaining blind to wonders that other species would treasure beyond measure. He shook his head slowly, still amazed after all these years. They are paradox-given flesh, capable of breathtaking kindness and unimaginable violence, often in the same heartbeat. They can build civilizations that span the stars and then tear them down over disagreements that seem trivial to outside observers. His words grew more serious as he came to the heart of his message. They do not seek war, but they do not fear it either. They will extend the hand of friendship to any being who approaches them with honesty and good intentions, but they will close that hand into a fist if their trust is betrayed. He thought about the lessons that history had taught the galaxy. If you must interact with humanity, remember these truths. Be honest in your dealings with them, for they have an almost supernatural ability to detect deception. Be fair in your treatment of them, for they remember every kindness and every insult. And never, under any circumstances, harm their young. His crystal form shuddered as he recalled what had happened to every species that had made that final mistake. They have a saying among their people: those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. The humans remember everything, and they will never allow the same tragedy to happen twice. He paused again, his ancient mind turning over the final truth he had learned. Most importantly, understand this: they are patient. They do not act in haste or anger, but neither do they forget. A wrong done to humanity today may not be answered for 100 years, but it will be answered, and the response will be measured not by time, but by the weight of the original offense. He finished his entry and closed the document, knowing that future generations would read his words and add their own. The record would continue to grow as humanity continued to change and evolve, but some truths would never change. Across the galaxy, in 1,000 languages spoken by 1,000,000 different species, the wisdom about humanity was remarkably consistent. The humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy, for there are beings who could crush them with a single blow. The humans are not the smartest species in the galaxy, for there are minds that can calculate trajectories across the universe in the time it takes a human to blink. The humans are not the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, for there are civilizations that had mastered the secrets of creation while humanity was still learning to make fire. But the humans are the only species in all the cosmos who will chase you across the stars. Through generations if necessary, across centuries and millennia if that is what it takes. Not for conquest or resources or power, but simply because you made them angry. They will come for you with ships held together by determination and weapons forged from spite. They will come for you with soldiers who consider death a minor inconvenience and civilians who become warriors overnight. They will come for you with a patience that outlasts empires and a memory that never fades. And that is why no one in the galaxy dares to confront humanity. Not because they are afraid of being conquered, but because they are afraid of being remembered. For in the end, the humans taught the galaxy a lesson that would echo through eternity, that the most dangerous creature in all creation is not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest, but the one who simply refuses to stop. And humans never, ever stop. High Sovereign Malachar returned to his throne at the heart of the dominion of the 100 Thrones, and he could not stop thinking about what the Archon had told him. But unlike the other leaders who had left that secret meeting filled with fear and caution, Malachar felt only anger and wounded pride. He ruled the largest empire in the galaxy, commanding fleets that could darken the skies of 1,000 worlds. His ancestors had conquered species far more powerful than these soft pink creatures from that insignificant blue planet. How could he possibly be expected to fear beings who had only just learned to travel between the stars? The Archon has grown old and weak, Malachar declared to his advisors, and he has allowed superstition to cloud his ancient mind. His advisors nodded in agreement because they had learned long ago that disagreeing with the High Sovereign was a quick path to a painful death. The humans have been lucky, Malachar continued, warming to his subject. They defeated the Vraxians only because the Vraxians were weak and overconfident. But they will learn their true place when they face the might of the Dominion. He ordered his military commanders to plan a demonstration of power that would remind the galaxy who truly ruled among the stars. A small human colony would be destroyed as an example, and then the humans would learn to bow before the 100 Thrones like every other species. The target was a peaceful agricultural world called New Eden, where 42,000 humans lived simple lives growing food and raising families. They had no military installations and no defensive systems and no way to protect themselves from the orbital bombardment that Malachar ordered. The attack lasted less than an hour, and when it was over there was nothing left but ash and craters where farms and homes and schools had once stood. 42,000 lives ended in fire and thunder, and Malachar sat back on his throne with satisfaction, certain that the humans would now understand their place. But he had made a terrible mistake. The news of New Eden spread across human space like wildfire, and something ancient and terrible awakened in the hearts of billions. Humans everywhere stopped what they were doing and listened to the reports coming from that destroyed world, and a cold fury began to build that the galaxy had never witnessed before. The human government did not panic and they did not mourn. Instead, they made a simple declaration that was broadcast on every frequency across the known universe. The Dominion of the 100 Thrones has committed an act of war against humanity, the human president announced. A voice steady and calm, and somehow more frightening than any scream of rage could have been. And we are responding with what our people call total war. Malachar laughed when he heard this declaration, certain that the humans had just signed their own death warrant. What could they possibly do against an empire that spanned 100 thrones and commanded millions of warships? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Within one cycle, human vessels began appearing throughout Dominion space, but they were not the military warships that Malachar's admirals had prepared to fight. They were cargo haulers and mining ships and passenger liners and private yachts. and they were crewed by volunteers who had dropped everything in their lives to answer the call. Teachers and farmers and merchants and artists and engineers and doctors all came forward, asking only for a ship and a weapon and a chance to fight. They converted their civilian vessels into weapons of war, welding armor plates onto hulls that were never designed for combat, and mounting guns that they built themselves from whatever materials they could find. And then they attacked everything. The human fleets did not engage in traditional naval battles that the Dominion forces could win with their superior numbers and technology. Instead, they struck at supply lines and communication relays and fuel depots, appearing without warning and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They used tactics that no species had ever conceived before, infiltrating Dominion worlds and sabotaging critical infrastructure. They learned the Dominion language in mere weeks and broadcast messages that turned conquered peoples against their masters. They attacked in ways that followed no pattern and made no military sense, keeping the Dominion forces constantly off balance. The war dragged on, and Malachar watched his empire begin to crumble around him, not from direct conquest, but from 1,000 cuts that never stopped bleeding. His economy collapsed as trade routes became too dangerous to travel, and his conquered subjects rose up against him with human weapons and human training. Finally, broken and desperate, Malachar sued for peace. The human admiral who came to negotiate was a woman named Catherine Chun, and she was small and soft and looked nothing like the monster that Malachar had expected. She walked into his throne room with her head held high and her eyes burning with that same terrifying calm that humans seem to carry in their very souls. "You wish to surrender," she said, and it was not a question. Malachar nodded his great head, his pride shattered and his arrogance burned away by the fires of a war he could never have won. "Here are our terms," Admiral Chun continued, pulling out a datapad and reading in a clear voice. "You will pay reparations for every life lost on New Eden. 42,000 payments to be distributed among the families of the dead." Malachar agreed immediately, willing to pay any price to end the nightmare. "You will surrender every commander and official who was involved in planning and executing the attack," Chun continued, "to face trial for crimes against humanity." Again, Malachar agreed, throwing his own people to the humans without hesitation. "And finally," Chun said, looking up from her datapad to meet his eyes, "you will make a public acknowledgement of what you did, broadcast across the entire galaxy, so that everyone knows what happened to New Eden." Malachar agreed to this final term as well, and when the document was signed and the war was officially over, he found himself asking the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why?" he demanded, his voice weak with confusion. "You could have demanded territory or power or a complete submission. You could have destroyed us entirely. Why do you ask only for justice?" Admiral Chun looked at him for a long moment, and something in her eyes shifted from the cold fury of war to something almost like pity. "Because we are not monsters," she said quietly. "We are just human, and you should be grateful that is all we are." She turned and walked away, leaving Malachar alone on his throne with the ashes of his pride scattered around him. And the galaxy learned that humans did not fight for conquest or glory or power. They fought for justice, and they would not stop until they had it.